What's happening, folks? Sammy, you there?
Yeah.
What's happening, lady?
I'm good. How are y'all?
It's all good. How's it going, everybody? Checking out this video after the fact. So, did you check out the Super Bowl?
No, I'm doing homework.
Okay, are you not a football fan?
Not really. I watch it if it's Alabama.
I feel you. I'm not actually a football fan either, but I watched the Super Bowl. So, the spoiler alert, Tampa Bay Buccaneers won. Tom Brady won his 7th Super Bowl.
Good to know. Good to know.
There you
so
go.
if anyone asks me.
Exactly. There you go. All right. So, definitely want to jump into your questions as we go. For those of you watching this video, something Sammy emailed us in advance that she wanted to talk about was basically how to get players to communicate and more loudly. So I think communicate in general, if I'm correct, Sammy?
Yeah.
And then also with a higher volume. Ironically, that was something that I was working with some athletes on earlier today on the sand. We were talking about the concept of communication and the what's and why's and when's and essentially how to start developing that. So that's something that I definitely want to get into during this call. And some of the other things that people had addressed with us were some drills that we're going to incorporate and some new things that we're doing, which I'm going to send everybody a video tomorrow, Monday, 2 videos actually, that have some of the new drills. I didn't want to crush it tonight since the Super Bowl was on. A lot of people, it's really late where they are, so I just wanted to hit those things. So Sammy, was there anything else outside of your original question from the email that you wanted to hit?
No, just that.
Okay, sweet. So jumping into that concept, for everybody listening in on this call, this is call number 3 for the month of February. And ultimately, communication is a tricky one because, like we talked about in the last call in January, a lot of people have different concepts of how they go about communication, different ways they call stuff, different ways they say things. And so ultimately what that leaves, as I found, is this confusion about communication. So that's what I'd call it, a confusion about communication. People are not sure what they should say. They're not sure when they should say it. And then I've noticed that even when young athletes especially do get the boldness to be able to start communicating and trying to say something, if they're not saying the right thing, oftentimes they'll kind of get snapped at or told, that what they're saying is incorrect, which makes them go back into the shell of, I'm just not going to say anything. So I think a lot of us have experienced that before at some point in our careers or some point of our coaching or playing or whatever it is. So I want to invite in some tips. So Sammy, can you first, before I jump into it, share with me and with the rest of the audience some things that you've encountered, through your own sample size and through your own trial and error?
Well, this past weekend I had 2 players that are normally on the roster. So I was missing my 2 big middles, and they scored majority of our points.
Okay.
And so the problem was, I think, playing with new girls, so I tried to call timeouts to focus on, like, hey, we know this is a thing for us, like communication, because we've got a lot of quiet people on our team. So, like, what can we do to make whatever's going on better? And I have them, like, talk about what they think we should do, and then I'm like, okay, like, we got to apply that. And the biggest issue we were having, like, we called a timeout, we knew that was the thing, and it's, like, application. Like, how can I get y'all to apply it? Because I'm running out of things, like, motivational things to say for y'all to start talking. And you know already that's what you have to do. So
there you go. So for those of you who weren't able to hear that, essentially she had a tournament. Her 2 biggest middles are missing, the other primary point scorers, and they had some conversations about communication. Things weren't really changing. So like all things that I'll talk to you guys about, trying to put things together in real time, so once the match has started or once the tournament has started, usually is not going to have great dividends. Most times if you all are trying to put something into the works or make something a part of your culture, the best way to do it is to train it in advance, so in practice and that sort of thing. So some things to start thinking about for practices are do you have some sort of communication system? Like, is talk and communication and speaking just something that's talked about ambiguously? Like, we need to talk, we need to say something. Somebody's got to step up and do X, Y, and Z, which we hear pretty often. Lynn and I, for example, we we go around to tournaments or different matches, and a frequent saying we will hear from coaches is, somebody needs to step up or somebody needs to speak, and that makes it really clear to us that there's not a system, or people having specific responsibilities. So as it pertains to during the play communication, everybody should understand very clearly what their role and responsibility is, but where communication really gets important is pre-play and post-play. So pre-play, trying to get a group to talk and communicate really has to start to be attached in their mind to point scoring. So if you have a way to show your team in real time, or in video, or in watching another team, or even watching themselves in their own results, if you have a way to show them that a lack of communication equals the game being a toss-up or the score being a toss-up versus being able to communicate effectively creates the percentages going up for them to be able to win, that's what I've noticed makes the largest change in young athletes. So an example of that is if I'm coaching a group who at the end of matches tends to not close well. So if the score is within 2 points as we get to 18 or so in a game to 25, and we're just not able to close well, what I look at most frequently is what were the things that we had breakdown on, or what were the things that we did not close well on. And oftentimes there's usually a miscommunication. There's a serve that falls within the seam. There's a serve that goes away from the area desired. There's somebody who's not on their defensive responsibility, or making a play on a play that we said the opponent was going to do. So teaching athletes to have pre-play communication in everything they do during training is really important, and literally not allowing for the drill or competition to be initiated if that communication hasn't happened. So an example of that is with the simplest things that I go through with my players and with my teams, like serve receive passing repetitions, or front row attacking repetitions, or even triangle, simple things like that. I literally will not let the rep be initiated if an athlete does not call their responsibility. So for example, sometimes it's as simple as you need to call for what set you want, or sometimes it's as simple as saying what type of serve is going to come. But I tend to make it more complex as the athletes get more complex. So the ways that work are, sometimes I'll give people a responsibility reminder before a drill gets initiated. So for example, if I'm in a practice with a team and the drill is we're going to pass 5 balls and then rotate to set 5 balls and then rotate to attack 5 balls or something like that. Before a person is allowed to take their repetition, they'll have to speak every single play about what the tendency is of the player in front of them. So ball's likely on the line, I'm leading with my left foot, and I will literally make them repeat it before every single serve. Or if they're an attacker, I want my set height of the antenna 3 feet off, and I will literally make them repeat that before any time they get set. So what you'll find early times is the drills will be slower, or the pace will be slower. But as they start to understand, oh, coach is serious, like I'm not going to get an opportunity, I'm not going to get these repetitions unless I do my communication part, they start to understand the importance of it. And that doesn't necessarily mean it sticks, but it does give them the how-to, and it does give them the know-how of what to say, so that if they end up in tournament environments, they're not stuck, with this ideology of what do I say or what do I do. So to give you guys a live example of what happened today, I was training a group of 3 athletes out on the sand. 2 of them are 14, 1 of them is 12. And 2 of them are in 8th grade, 1 of them is in 6th grade. So the 6th grader is pretty new to sand volleyball. And these are 3 girls who I work with indoor, but I've been working with them on the sand as well to try to develop that game. And the youngest one, we were running a drill where the responsibility was whoever is in the play currently. So the passer and the setter, and the passer was going to become the attacker, don't have to communicate outside of, I'm going to take the ball mine. But the 2 people waiting on deck, they have to call out what portion of the court is open every time. And we started off the drill, and so there was a pass, and there was a set, and then I, who was the server and quote-unquote defender, was moving to either the left half of the court or the right half of the court. And the people who were off were supposed to call out which portion of the court is open. But because either a lack of confusion or a lack of understanding or whatever it was, I wasn't really hearing anything. So the first 2 times I said, I'm not hearing you guys call like line or angle, and right now we're in a culture where people are wearing masks, so they were wearing masks, so I don't really give the benefit of the doubt very often, but I gave them like a quick talk, in terms of, you guys have masks on, so you need to exaggerate, the volume that you're using, because I need to be able to hear you. And so even if you said it, if I'm not able to hear you, I want you to think in your mind that means you didn't say it. And so a little bit more time went on, about 2 minutes, and here and there I would hear like a faint line or angle, but ultimately I really couldn't hear it. And so I drilled in pretty hard to the 6th grader, realizing she's pretty brand new to this stuff, and I had an awareness that she probably didn't understand what she was supposed to be saying or how it worked. And so she came up to me at a break, and I was digging into her pretty hard, like, I've heard you speak in a louder volume, and I've heard you use volume, so I know it's possible for you. So you're either making a choice to be blatantly disrespectful and not, do what's being asked of you, or you have a lack of understanding. And this next thing that I said is what I want all of you guys listening to this to really remember. I told her, even if you say something completely incorrect, I don't care if you say blue, yellow, fish, or senior, as long as you're speaking, you're not gonna have me on your case about a lack of communication. My correction to you will be, what you're supposed to say or what I'd ideally like to have you say in that situation. But the only thing that is going to have you doing this drill incorrectly is if you're not speaking. And what I've found most frequently in my times working with either athletes or players who don't want to communicate is it comes from a lack of confidence. And that lack of confidence isn't necessarily always in themselves or their abilities, but it's in their understanding of the drill. So it's the same way you see in a classroom for young athletes, young students, where a teacher will ask a question and one person or no people in a class of 40 people will raise their hand. And that doesn't necessarily come because the higher majority of the class doesn't know the answer. It's because people don't want to speak because they believe somebody else will, or they don't want to be wrong in front of a group of their peers. So being able to give somebody the green light and telling them that it's completely fine if the answer is wrong, and you actually encourage them to speak every single time with a wrong answer and be okay getting corrected rather than saying nothing. So if the communication as a coach to them becomes less about what they're saying and it becomes more about being willing to say, then I've seen athletes be more willing to loosen up. So as the session went on today, there was a little bit more of a communication from that girl. And there were times where she completely slipped, where she dug the ball on the left half of the court, and she would say right side, and I'd let the play go all the way through, and I'd start with this part. I'd say, Anaya, it's really great that you're deciding to speak now. Now, as you're speaking, I want you to start to work at saying it accurately. So in the last time, you said right side while you're on the left side, do your best to say left side. But I want to make it clear, like, I would rather you say the wrong thing and say something than say nothing. And so every single time I would speak to her, although it's a little bit tedious, I would preface with, I would rather you say it incorrectly and say something than say nothing, and I would close it with that same message. And that kind of repetition in an athlete's ear and that kind of repetition in a team's ear has been what I've found to really turn the tide on more quiet teams and teams who don't necessarily have the volleyball IQ to be able to keep up with what to say. So, Sammy, I want to get your thoughts on all that I just said.
That was really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, how do you think that could help you, or how do you think that would potentially be able to help some of the other people listening in on the call?
I think the point you made about confusion about communication, I didn't really think about that. And so a lot of the girls that I have now are players that I haven't had before, and so they're probably not used to the terminology I use, and I keep forgetting, like, things are probably different in this area compared to how I grew up and I learned how to play volleyball. So I think making an edit with my own coaching and being able to communicate myself with what terminology we should use is going to be really helpful.
Yeah. So for those of you who couldn't hear, what Sammy was saying is essentially what resonated with her was the confusion about communication concept, and she could improve, in her opinion, being aware of the way that she's communicating, because it could potentially be different than what athletes are used to. And so that being said, as coaches, we all want to have a very good gauge and radar of what situations we're being too lenient, like taking too much of the responsibility for the athletes, and in what situations there is, some room for us to be more aware or understanding, or even to be able to shift. So this is definitely one of those situations. There are times where you can communicate very clearly and very concisely and very consistently, and athletes are making the conscious decision that they're not going to respond to what you're saying. And in those situations, honestly, the best thing to do is to put the people on the court, or give the people the rewards who are listening. But if you're in a rare situation where it seems like that's the whole lot, being able to always show that individualized connection and try to relate with them, that is what I've also found really helps. So if I'm talking to an athlete who's brand new, I personally am fortunate to have a story where I can relate to almost every athlete. Like, I can talk to somebody who's brand new, playing with a bunch of people who are way better than them, and I can say that when I first got to UC Irvine, I was the last player on the team, and I had never played Division I, and I was this and I was that. Or I can say when I had started playing in high school, I played on the Frost Soft team, and I was not a starter as a ninth grader, and people go, "Oh man, I didn't realize that. I thought that maybe you had always played varsity, and maybe you just walked into Division I and playing professionally." And that's not my reality, and that's not most people's reality. Most people's reality is they'll have to work really hard to understand, they'll have to work really hard to comprehend, they'll have to work really hard to become even a decent player, let alone, a really good player. So being able to remember that as coaches is pretty crucial. And athletes in today's generation especially, they're not easily reached. They're not easily convinced. They're not easily led. So we have to be even more strategic as coaches and as mentors to be able to reach them, not in a way that is coddling, not in a way that gives them everything they want, not in a way that makes it comfortable for them, but in a way that they'll understand, gosh, I really do want to get outside of my comfort zone for this person leading me, or I really do want to be willing to make changes for this person leading me. Those are the concepts that great coaches, really bring about. So you, Sammy, and then the other coaches listening in on this call, as well as the athletes, that's the largest takeaway, being able to relate to where they are. So if you guys could put yourselves in a situation in life where maybe things aren't easily understood for you, or maybe somebody's asked you to do something, or maybe you've asked yourself to do something, whether it's like, I want to have a consistent workout regimen and you haven't really stuck to it, or I want to play more volleyball in my life and you haven't really stuck to it, or I want to read more and you haven't really stuck to it. Think of why that's challenging for you. Like, oh, my schedule gets in the way, or oh, like, I don't have a gym to go to, or oh, by the end of the day it's already 9 p.m. and I just want to sleep. Like, try to think in your own life why something that you in theory would like to do has been challenging for you to actually execute with consistency, and then try to relate that, to what your athlete could potentially be going through. That's what I like to do most frequently. If I have athletes who seem to be stumped, or if I have athletes who just don't seem to be responding to whatever the message is, I do my best to put myself in their shoes and go, what would I require in this situation to understand? And that to me is always the best way for you guys to go. So all good on that, Sammy?
Yeah.
All right. So what we're going to hit today in today's seminar and online class is this week we're getting into some new styles of drills. So I wanted to talk about two separate questions and have everybody think on these two things. So the first question we're going to ask is, why would we choose shuffle blocking versus swing blocking? And the second one is, why would you choose to run a higher offense versus a faster offense? So those are two things in volleyball right now that I'm noticing in the women's game and in the men's game are really becoming more and more points of emphasis. And so I want to share my own perspective after hearing a little bit of you all's perspective, and Sammy, and then everybody else listening in on the call, you guys having an opportunity to think about how you would answer that. But Sammy, for you, how would you answer that? Why would you choose swing blocking versus shuffle blocking, or shuffle blocking versus swing blocking?
I think I would use swing blocking personally because I'm a little bit shorter and most of the players I have are probably about average height and helps me get higher if I use my arms to jump. But then shuffle blocking, I think you can close seams better because you're facing the whole time.
Yeah, so the big debates between swing blocking and shuffle blocking, what I hear most of the time is swing blocking allows you to get higher, where shuffle blocking, like you said, allows you to keep the play in front of you. For me, the situational nature of the two are, to me, I would like groups to start with shuffle blocking because it really teaches the discipline part of blocking, being able to keep your hips square, being able to get your hands across the net evenly, being able to see the attacker, where I see a lot of teams make more mistakes in blocking than they do positive plays because of their lack of discipline. And so to be specific about that discipline that I'm talking about, if you have very flaily arms, if you are twisting in the air, if you're netting more frequently because of the extra movement, you're giving more points away than you are earning, as a blocker at every level, whether we're talking about 12s or 18s and on up into college. And vice versa, swing blocking at a high level can be very effective because it not only allows you to get higher, but it also allows you to move more quickly laterally if you open your hip and cross over. So just like in passing versus defense, there's a reason that we don't train people to shuffle, when they're running down shots or balls off the block. We teach them to run because when you cross your feet over, you're going to be faster. Versus when you shuffle, you're not going to be as fast, but you will be more in control. That's why when we're generally teaching people to pass, serve, receive, we don't teach them to run as much as we teach them to shuffle. So in the debate for me, and I've encountered this a lot with my athletes lately, and it's the reason why it's a topic of conversation, it's really important to me that we don't go straight into swing blocking when we teach athletes. For me, it's really important that they learn how to shuffle effectively first because that really teaches and emphasizes the details of being able to keep their hands in front of them, of being able to move laterally and see what's in front of them, but also being able to get over the net, and have a low press versus being up really high and then have more balls sneak under them or even worse, tool off of them. Where swing blocking to me can ultimately be an effective tool, but really should be utilized to create more speed rather than height. So I run into a lot of people, whether it's who we do camps for or athletes who come to us or programs who we do consulting for, and I find that coaches are very, very early and quick to get into swing blocking. And I also notice that a lot of their teams, not everybody's teams, but a lot of the teams have pretty undisciplined habits as it pertains to getting across the net, the timing of their move, being able to close the seams. So something I'd want all of you to be willing to incorporate into your trainings when it comes to blocking are both being willing to look at some shuffle blocking and being willing to execute some shuffle blocking in addition to training some swing blocking, but really having it be a workup and teaching the discipline necessary in shuffle blocking versus swing blocking. That's really important to me. So in closing on that concept, I want you all to be willing to sample out some shuffle blocking and see what it does for your efficiency and see what it does for your numbers. And then when it comes to swing blocking, being really into teaching the efficiency of opening the hips but also closing the hips before people take off the ground, rather than having the hips open and twisting in a literal 180 while in the air. Being able to jump and land in a position with the hips square to the 10-foot line. That is a really big deal to me blocking wise, and the athletes who I've been working with lately who've been making big strides in blocking, that is something that they've really had a good understanding of, is how to jump and land in the same position. That's pretty crucial. So Sammy, do you have any other thoughts on swing blocking versus shuffle blocking?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And then secondarily, want to get into decision making about fast offense versus high offense. So Sammy, wanted to get your perspective on that. How you're feeling about fast offense versus high offense.
If I have enough time to work with a team, I like to try and use a faster offense. We call them Hudson sevens. It's like more of a lob set, but still first tempo. I think it helps a lot when we're at a height disadvantage because it makes it harder for the other team's blockers to move around with those faster sets.
100%. So the reasons again, and this is for anybody at any level, whether it be collegiate, professional, on down to beginner. If you're coaching and you're considering running a high offense versus a fast offense, the things that people generally notate are, in a fast offense, we're using that to create seams, to split blocks, to get hitters to the ball sooner. In a high offense, it creates more opportunities for hitters to hit balls. There's less miscommunications. There's more opportunities to get step closes to the ball and not have varying sets. So in my opinion, the two largest things that we should be looking at when it comes to fast offense versus more of a round, higher offense are two things. Quality of your setting, one, and two, reach of your hitters. So a lot of people think, well, I've got small hitters, so we need to run a fast offense and be able to make plays that way. Or I have big hitters, so we want to run a high offense and just let our hitters, quote unquote, go up and get it. But what I've noticed in my sample size, which is a good amount over time, is that big hitters, and I'm totally generally speaking, obviously there's outliers, obviously there's different situations from place to place, but I'm talking about the larger percentage. Bigger hitters who are hitting really high balls do really well early in sets and early in matches. And as the time goes on, they start to get soft blocked more often. They start to get dug more often because teams are filling the slots that they were hitting earlier, and they're not getting as much of an opportunity to be able to do what people would want from these smaller players, which is split the seams and beat the block that way. Where with smaller players who run in these faster offenses, I end up seeing the opposite, where early in the game they're effective because they're getting on top of the fast offense, they're one-on-one on the block. But as time goes on and the game comes off the net, which tends to happen as matches go on, there's less and less perfect situations in serve, receive, and defense. That's when hitters start to struggle a little bit because the tempo with smaller people is so fast that they're not able to still hit with range. So we're early in the game. If a hitter has the option to hit line and the angle and put the ball right over the block, later on they start to have one shot or two shots, or unfortunately sometimes no shots, and their percentages go way down. So something that I would want you guys to look at with your offenses and how you're running it is to not be generic, to not have this is the way we run it or this is the only way we run it, but to start to get more specific with your group and say we're going to train things quicker regardless of what our setter situation is. We're going to work on running something faster because there's going to be situations that we get into where that could be more effective, as in we're playing against smaller teams where even if they get their hands over the net, we're beating them with speed. They're not able to swing block. They're not getting in front of us or as high as well. Or we're going to run a higher offense because we're playing against a larger team. We want to have time to be able to utilize the block or hit the ball off the hands or really get some good vision on how we can go around these people because we're getting too many trap situations if the set's unideal with a fast offense. So in teams who I work with and athletes who I work with, I've gone against typical teaching in that I've got smaller hitters, we need to go fast and beat the block. I've got bigger hitters, we're going to chuck it up and let them go quote-unquote hit. And I've actually gone a little bit where it's to the in-between. I've gone a little bit opposite where if I have smaller hitters, I actually give them more of a round set so they learn how to play into the block and play off the block and be able to go around the block that way. And then with my bigger people, because they're already up with their reach, because they're already taller, because they already have extension of their arm, running something a little quicker so that if they get into an unideal situation, they're still able to snap a ball down or make an open hand play or put the ball, where the defense is going to be in trouble. So what do you think about those concepts, Sammy?
I think it shows in the stats from this weekend, with my bigger hitter, she had probably 19 kills compared to my smaller hitter had about 9. And I think she's new to hitting, so it's probably harder for her to get those shots, like you said, and I didn't really think about that before. But then the bigger hitter that I have on the outside is doing pretty well with the fast set. So I think I could probably make a few edits to be able to give the smaller hitter some range.
Yeah, ultimately, I think people have this large fear, as I've noticed, of gosh, we don't want to get blocked. We gotta make our offense so that way we don't get blocked. But this is a stat I throw out to people pretty frequently, and I think that they're kind of shocked. At every level, so professionally, collegiately, high school, club, a good blocker, and you can go look up the stats right now. The best blockers at every level block about 1.3 balls per set. So if I'm estimating against a team, say a team has 2 quote-unquote good blockers, and they're blocking 1.3 each, which is a total of 2.6 balls per set. And in honesty, that stat would be if they weren't blocking together, which a lot of times they are. It's a right side and a middle, it's a left side and a middle. But let's just say, for, to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's 2 separate blockers who are in different rotations. 2.6 blocks in a game to 25 is not that many of the points. And that's the better blockers. The better blockers are blocking that many. So essentially that's a message to say the block should not be as intimidating as people make it out to be. What kills people is unforced errors. Unforced errors are the thing that take opportunities away from people. So being able to design an offense that's based around hitters hitting more balls in the court for kills or for digs gives your team more opportunity to have success. The more times, we're trying to run it fast and we shoot it outside of the antenna and it's unhittable, or we're trying to run it fast and it's low and inside and we have to tip it for the defense to be able to get a clean transition play. Those are the things that kill us rather than having a higher set where there's a well-formed block and us getting stuffed. Have we all seen matches where somebody gets blocked, 3 or 4 times in a row? For sure. But I imagine they don't stick out on our mind as something that happens every single practice or every single match, where most of us have either played with or coached a team that has had multiple games where we hit just so many balls out between serves and hits out of bounds. Plays out of bounds are what kill teams at every level more so than getting actually blocked. So when we are deciding on the tempo of our offense for each individual, A1 to me is making sure that everybody is clear how to do everything, or everybody has a comfort level of being able to do everything. But 2, that each individual set or set routes are designed for them to hit more balls in the court or hit more balls that would have gone into the block or off the block. That's where the percentages lie. So when you guys are analyzing, these kills versus lack of kills and that sort of thing, I really want you all to make sure you take an inventory of how many balls are we hitting out of bounds versus how many times are we being blocked. And I bet you'll look at the stats and go, wow, that's a big time discrepancy. Usually it's around 9, 10, 11 hits out of bounds versus 1 or 2 times we got blocked, rather than how most people think in their minds. It's we're getting blocked a bunch and we're hitting the ball out here and there. That's usually not the reality at any level. And you could watch any match, any series of matches at any level. Of course there'll be outliers, but for the majority of the time you're going to see far more balls hit out of bounds than you do seeing people get actually stuff blocked. All right, so things we talked about today. For Sammy, she had brought a really great question to the table and asking us, what things can I do to get my team to communicate better, more effectively? So some things you guys can write in your notebook are A, making sure there's not a confusion about communication, making sure that it is very clearly communicated what we want to say, how we want to say it, why we want to say it, and when we want to say it. And then making people have to do live repetitions of actually saying it, rather than it being this ambiguous thing that we throw in when our team's down by a couple points. We want to make sure the habits that we want people to perform on the court are put into our trainings at practice. So even if that means slowing down your practices for a little while to make sure people are communicating the right way and saying and calling for what they want and giving pre-play information and post-play information, build that into your practice and your team will start to show those things in real time. 2, on the swing blocking versus shuffle blocking, Start to take an inventory on discipline. Are you netting more than you're actually blocking balls? Are you getting tooled out of bounds more than you're actually blocking balls? Those are really important questions to the debate of swing blocking versus shuffle blocking. Shuffle blocking is a way more efficient way to get your hands across the net and get positive touches. I do agree that generally speaking, swing blocking is going to get you more stuffs, but if currently you look at your team and it's at the expense of more nets and more tools, I would consider making a change, at least in some rotations. Where vice versa, if you're shuffle blocking as a team and you're getting a couple positive touches, but ultimately you're just not quite high enough to be able to challenge the attackers in your league, look at making a change. But be willing to have a situational defense and not have one style of play. And then as it pertains to set tempo, be willing to look at the percentages. How many balls are we swinging into the court for kills on versus how many balls are we making errors on, and how does that equation have to do with the tempo of our offense? Is our tempo so fast that hitters are never able to even get their body behind the ball and have 3 real shots at a kill and their shot committed into one thing? Or is our high offense really disallowing us to be able to hit with range or get around people's blocks? Like, those are the questions that are not being answered enough for people. That's really important in these Zoom meetings that I bring to you guys' attention as you go into your week and go into your month. All right, Sammy, how you feeling?
I'm good. I thought that was really good.
Sweet.
Learned a lot.
Feel like you picked up some stuff today?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, wonderful. Is there anything else that's on your mind? Questions, comments, concerns, thing you think that would help the group?
I think I'm good for now.
Okay. All right, those of you listening in on the call, if you guys have anything, make sure to put it in the thread in the email. You guys hit that reply all button from the February 7th seminar. Tomorrow I'm going to be sending you guys a video of some drills that we've been doing inside of the gym from these past 2 days. It's Super Bowl. Congratulations to Tampa Bay for winning the Super Bowl. For me, I'd like all of you guys to be willing to watch other sports because it teaches you how to win and how to become more successful. For now, we're signing off on this call. We will see you guys next time.